Welcome to Living the Reclaimed Life podcast. I'm Denisha. We're glad you're here for conversations that revive hope, inspire healing, and encourage you to live a vibrant life with Christ. So grab a cup of coffee as we chat with today's guest. Welcome to this episode of Living the Reclaimed Life. Today, I get to introduce you to my friend, Jennifer Milbourn. And Jennifer, we're so excited to have you today for so many reasons. We have been laughing a lot off the air and just having fun. So today's going to be a very real conversation.
It is. And that's exactly how it should be.
It is. It is. Well, Jennifer, welcome. I'm so excited to have you on the podcast. I know we've been trying for this for a few months, so glad to finally get you on here.
Yes. Thank you for having me. I'm excited.
Me too. Well, I got to meet you through the Abortion Survivors Network. You were involved way before I even found out I was a survivor, which was so cool. Thank you for pioneering that road with Melissa before. And now both of us are taking this crazy adventure out into using our stories and just being out there as speakers. So I'm just excited for everybody to get to know you and get to know your heart and just what the Lord has kind of dropped in your spirit for today.
Oh, thank you. Yeah, I know. It is a crazy journey that doesn't really have a roadmap with it.
Yes, I would really like the 6-year plan with Excel sheets nicely tucked in a 3-ring binder. Anybody who knows me is laughing because that is what I would like. And the adventure that you and I are on in this season of our lives is not that. And there's a part of me, as much as I would love it, I think it would be kind of boring because every day is a new adventure.
Right? Have you seen that meme that has the roller coaster and they're just about to go down the steep incline? And it says, when walking with Holy Spirit.
And then the passengers all calm, right?
I know.
Yes. There's one freaking out and then the one representing the Holy Spirit's all calm.
Yeah.
Yes. I'm the one freaking out with my arms up ah!
Me too, girl.
Well, tell us a little bit about you. There's so many just life changes you're going through right now and so much that you've come through. So tell us a little bit about your story.
Yeah. So my name is Jennifer Jen, and I'm 43 years old, been married for 22 years, and I have 3 kids. My oldest is 21. His name's Ethan, and he's a Marine serving down in San Diego and married and adulting way better than I did at his age. I'm so proud. And I have my daughter is Maddie. She's 20 years old. She's a criminal justice major wanting to help victims of a variety of traumas. And she definitely has a gift as far as talking out the really difficult things that people can go through. So we're really proud of her for pursuing her passion. And I have an 18-year-old son who's up at Oregon State. He plays football and he got up there on scholarship, was completely God's provision. And he has straight A's and staying true to who he is and being a mostly good boy up there, right? And we're super proud of him. Yeah, so life changes. I quit my job a week ago, and I just quit it. God provided for a couple of months of income, so I could kind of decide what to do next. And it really didn't require any decision on my part. The Lord just said, "Okay, this is where we're going to go. This is who you are. This is what you're going to do," to travel and share my story and bring hope to people. And I mean, what better job is there than that?
Yeah, that's pretty amazing, especially right now, with our stories as survivors, it's a narrative, I think, that's so well needed. And I'm so thankful for Melissa for really pioneering that. And she saw this coming and saw us getting out there, using our stories, sharing our stories, our voice before we ever even imagined finding healing, from our stories. So would you share a little bit about your survivor story?
Yeah. So I found out when I was 19 years old, and I was out shopping with my adoptive mom. And I, like most teenagers, I challenged my mom to tell me something really cool I didn't know about myself. And it must have been a God moment because she ended up sharing with me that my biological mom, who was her sister, went in for an abortion. and was unable to complete it due to the size of my head at the time. Obviously, gestationally, I was farther along than she probably told the abortionist at the clinic. And she was told, so it was a vacuum aspiration procedure, which is what I survived. And that requires a long tube, being inserted into the embryonic sac. And it basically, and I'm sorry for the wording, I hope this doesn't trigger anyone, but it basically sucks out the baby. And you'll notice that I don't say fetus because that's a scientific word. But ultimately, no matter how small a life is, it is considered a baby. So my head was gestationally further along and they were unable to complete the procedure. And the abortionist ended up telling her that more than likely she would miscarry the baby because the embryonic sac was torn. And lo and behold, I was born, I guess, about 5 months later and survived it. So my adoptive mom told me this story. I'm 19 years old, right? And I just looked at her, looked out the window of the truck we were in, and I just started crying because it was so overwhelming. I didn't know what to do with it. And she told me, hey, just you need to be fine with it because you're here, aren't you? Like, you get to live, so don't worry about it. And I know that can sound harsh on her part, but I think she was embarrassed that had come out of her mouth. She probably didn't think I was going to react the way I did, and wanted me to be okay. And I think as parents, sometimes we say things like that, like, no, you are okay, so be okay. And we don't validate the pain and the hurt with it. So I was an obedient child. And so I built this wall and wiped my tears. And I didn't deal with the trauma of learning that probably until my late 20s, early 30s. And it was even something that when I married my husband, when I was 21, I didn't even tell him at the time because it was this family secret, right? And it was so deep and so, to me, so horrific because I had already dealt with feeling unwanted for so long that just confirmed that I was unwanted. And being the positive, encouraging personality I still was despite that, at least for other people. Of course, I wouldn't encourage myself necessarily, right? Because I was so unwanted. I wasn't in a place to deal with it. Yeah. So that was basically what I survived. And the moment when I began to deal with it, I was at a women's prayer meeting, and my pastor, Pastor Celine McDonald, got up and started sharing her story of being adopted and saved from a family of alcoholics. And I thought, oh my goodness, like someone else is adopted. Granted, I wasn't even focused on surviving the abortion, but even being adopted in itself comes with its challenges. And most of the kids I grew up weren't adopted, and they were raised in their families. So I still felt like an outcast and unwanted because of the adoption. So I thought, okay, Jen, it was late 20s, probably around 29 or 30. It's time to share that you're adopted, because I hadn't told anyone. And so this was like a women's group. We're all sharing our hearts. So I get up and say, yeah, so I'm adopted, and give a little bit of information regarding it. And then all of a sudden it like spilled out of my mouth that I survived an abortion. And I literally, like, my hands went up to my mouth and I went, oh, like, what did I just do? And I just started crying, and I sat down and just covered my face, and it was completely silent. I mean, I just like threw this shocking fact out there. I'm sure the women didn't know what to do with it. Right. And my pastor, Celine, just came over and just wrapped her arms around me. And that was the moment that I realized, okay, like, this is a trauma. This is something that I need to deal with, that I need to come to grips with.
And so you knew the Lord then. How old were you when you came to the Lord?
I was 20.
20. So in between finding out you were a survivor and then really beginning to, wrestle with it, would you say when you were at that retreat, did that kind of begin a process of wrestling with that trauma? Or
it did. A lot of those emotions that I felt when I was 19, when I found out, came spilling out. And up until that point, my focus was, raising my three kids, being a wife, learning about Jesus. Who is he? What did he do for me? What can I do for him? And those, and I had felt that call of leadership as well. And so I wanted to answer that call, but I had known that there was this deep-seated pain always, like in the back, right? Like way stuffed down in my soul that I didn't know what to do with. And I think I felt that it would never be resolved, that was just my lot in life, because my biological mom didn't want me. And I was adopted within the family, but still there were so many challenges within the family, because when you have a secret like that, you're not raised as, for at least from my experience, that was always hanging over me. And it was always kind of told to me, like in little ways, like, Jenny, go away, go to your room. Jenny, you're talking too much, go away. So I had been raised by older parents who didn't have as much patience probably for someone young. And because on top of this, my biological mom was an alcoholic. So as far as I know, I don't have any physical repercussions of the actual abortion itself, but more of the alcoholism. There were just certain things resembling fetal alcohol syndrome that didn't fully develop. And part of that, I believe, is some things with my thought process and the way that I think was just a little different than others. And my emotions, of course. My emotions were kind of all over the place. So in taking all of that, at that moment when I was at that women's prayer group and I said this, all those insecurities just came flooding back and was very overwhelming. And I remember at that point, I didn't have a job. So I was home with my kids. They were my main priority. And thankfully, my husband worked and provided for us. I did a lot of crying, and it was putting my kids in front of the TV or go outside and play was a big one with us, go get a board game, just so I could process, my pain through that.
And I'm curious, when that narrative, and so many of us as survivors, I know people listening might think, whoa, hold on, like survived an abortion. Is that a thing? Right? We get asked that a lot. Is that a thing?
Right.
That's a thing. And there's a whole lot of us, right? And one narrative that I know that flows through a lot of our hearts is that unwanted piece that you described.
Yeah.
And so I would love to hear a little bit about just how did Jesus's narrative over you? How did that, because I think a lot of people, survivor, not survivor, we can relate to that unwanted feeling based on the families we grew up in or circumstances in life. How did Jesus help you? How did your relationship with him help you with that unwanted narrative?
So when I joined the church and got to know him and what he did for me, right? And became a Christian wife, a mom, kind of took up my role in the church as far as ministries. I felt that I was always coming up against this wall and that I couldn't get past that wall. And it was really frustrating because I would think, oh, well, it's because you're not good enough and you're unwanted. So it's okay because God will give you as much as he can because you're unwanted. I mean, the lie of being unwanted was so deep in my psyche, in my heart, that I had accepted it and was like, well, it's okay because God can only do so much for me. And so in that thought process, I'm putting him in a box and I'm not allowing him to fully flood my heart. But it really came down to this moment. I was cleaning my bathroom and I was on my knees, scrubbing the floor, right? Because I have boys and they miss and it's frustrating. But I'm in my zone, right? Today's my cleaning day and I'm going to clean. And I felt, I was listening to, worship music, which I usually do. And I felt kind of the Lord just pressing on my heart, hey, I want to talk to you. And immediately I was like, no, I'm cleaning my floor. So I start scrubbing
There's spiritual moments all throughout the day. Laundry, scrubbing floors, boys, all the things. Those are spiritual moments too.
It's terrible because I was just, in my zone. So I start scrubbing again and it was like a hey, let's talk. And I thought, oh, this is a moment we need to have. Okay. So I stopped scrubbing and I just sat on the floor, and I just felt, the still small, quiet voice within me saying, I want you to forgive your biological mom. And he said her name, of course. And I thought, well, that's weird. Like, what do I do with that? And I just sat there and didn't reply. And I just felt him, kind of impress that again on my heart. And over, probably across a half-hour period. Like, if I'm being honest, sometimes we don't always just jump to the things that the Lord, asks of us, right? Even though I'd like to think I would every time because of everything God's done for me, I just kind of sat there stubborn, thinking, well, I don't know how to do that. And no, why would I do that? His love just like flooded me in a way that I had never felt it before, even after these probably 10 or so years of going to church and being involved in worship and knowing who God is and what he can do for us. And so I kind of fell on the ground, face first, and started crying. And I said the words, I forgive, my biological mom. And I'll be honest, I didn't feel a whole lot from it. It wasn't like this glorious moment of God's presence or anything. It was just like a release. Okay, I did it. I was obedient. And I thought, okay. And then I felt like, I did what he wanted me to do. And I just wiped my tears and went back to scrubbing the floor. But then the next day he came to me again and told me to say it. And it was a little bit easier. And so I did. And then it was just weeks and months of, him reminding me to say it. And I didn't really begin to start feeling anything probably for a couple of months, because I felt like I was doing it more out of obedience, which, we should always have a heart to do for the Lord. But there was a moment in my bedroom where I was just getting ready and I just kind of half-handedly said it. And I just stopped and paused and realized that bitterness, that twinge of pain wasn't there. And by my confessing that I forgave her, I was practicing forgiveness. And it had never occurred to me that forgiveness could be practiced, right? Because I like to think with forgiveness, the emotions have to match up what I'm saying. So if I'm saying I forgive her, then I have to feel like I forgive her. I have to feel better. I have to not feel the pain anymore. And it just kind of opened up my, this entire message, if you will, of what forgiveness really was. And after probably over a year of doing this daily, I recognized that I had forgiven her. And I was finally in a place where that wall that I kept hitting, right, in my life with the Lord had crumbled and was gone. And I was stopping myself from moving forward with him. He is obviously greater than our pain, greater than that feeling of unwantedness that had overtaken everything in me, right? Prevented me from fully knowing true healing and forgiveness with him. And that was really the moment that I realized, oh, wow, this is huge. And shortly after, or maybe a couple of years after that, my friend Chris Buno had gone to the valley. I live up in the California mountains, so we have a valley for all our shopping needs. And she had seen Melissa Ohden, who's the founder of Abortion Survivors Network, at a Christian speaking event, and came to my work. I was working at a coffee house at the time, and said, hey, I met this woman named Melissa Ohden. I gave her your email address, and here's hers. She survived an abortion. You should talk to her. And I was taking out the trash at the time. I've got two. I know, right? I've got 2 big bags of trash, and I'm like, excuse me? And I had to repeat it. And I said, what do you mean she survived an abortion? Because even back then, there was no verbiage for it. I had never Googled, oh, did anyone else survive an abortion? I think it was such a traumatic event and pain in my life that, I was so closed in and self-centered in a sense of my own pain that I didn't even have the idea to see if anyone else had survived it, right? Because I just wanted to hide it. because I didn't want that to be a part of who I was. And so she repeated herself and gave me the email address. And I said, okay, we'll see. And I went back to work, and I don't think I emailed Melissa for a couple of months. And even when I did, it was, I hope she doesn't still have it. It was a little awkward, hey, I heard you survived an abortion. I did too. So yeah, I hope you have a good day. Bye. What do you
I'm
say?
sure my email had to be so awkward too. I'll bet you she does have them though, just because of who she is, right?
Oh no.
I'll bet she does. So what did you receive back from her?
She sent me back an email pretty quickly. I remember it was like just within a few hours, and said, hi, my name is Melissa, briefly shared her story with me, and that she was so proud of me for reaching out. And then she just started speaking of the unwantedness, the things that I had struggled with. And that in itself was overwhelming, because I felt like she was in my head. And I'm going, okay, I haven't really shared a whole lot of this, because by this time I did share my story at our local pregnancy center for a fundraising gala they had. And which, that was like the beginning of my public speaking, if you will. And, I had my notes right in front of me, and it was, just me reading it because it was so emotional. And I hadn't fully, it was just the beginning of sharing something that's so personal that tormented me for so long. But I wanted to help the pregnancy center. And if they had an abortion survivor, or for me back then, I coined it as a survivor of an abortion, then that would help them get more money for their cause. So that's really why I did it. And I shared my story, and they put that in the newsletter. So other than that, that was my only experience with surviving an abortion. So all the feelings, everything that I had had up to that point, Melissa, wrote out in this letter. And I thought, oh my gosh, like, this is a woman I have to get to know. And that was, unbeknownst to me, that was the beginning of the Lord fully, beginning to show me what my calling and purpose was. Because that was something that I desired all of these years of serving him. What is my calling and purpose? And for the meantime, majority of it was raising my children. I mean, that should be, mamas as our number one ministry, pouring everything that we are into our kids, raising each kid the way that God wants us to, right? Because they're all so different. And sometimes they require a little bit of different shepherding and loving and teaching. And it just started this conversation. And I think I told you earlier when we were just hanging out and talking, I created my little Facebook page. I modeled it immediately after hers and was like, okay, well, I guess this is who I am. How funny and weird that God would take my greatest pain and turn it into my calling and purpose.
Amen. I think that's true for so many, people who we watch God turn our pain into purpose. I mean, yeah, I think that's amazing, because you had victory over that. It started scrubbing that toilet that day when God began to have you forgive, your biological mom, and that, what a journey you went on. And that victory that you have can be a victory for other people too. Just like Melissa was further down the road than you were, when you first reached out to her than I was when I reached out to her, that she was further down the road in her healing, in her advocacy, all of the things. And it's so neat that then she was there to reach out a hand to you and to me and to all the other survivors to say, like, I'm here and you're going to get through this. There was so much peace. The fact we got an email back from a real person.
I know.
Not like a form email. It was genuinely, she was speaking to whatever I vomited in my email, and it was just so neat to get that, I understand what you're going through. And, it feels very small. I think there's over 400 of us now that we've connected with us. We know that there's tens of thousands of survivors. It's just a matter of, getting out and helping people. Like when Melissa spoke and your friend came to you and said, like, I found someone else with this piece of their story. You don't know until you know. So it's a
Yeah.
matter of just us getting mobilized and getting out there. But I love for her to be able to say, me too. And for you to go, oh, I'm not alone in that. I have found so much healing.
Yeah.
Just through being connected with other people who have similar stories as I do. That's been incredible for my healing journey. I don't know how that's been for you.
Well, it's funny because I go back to that moment I was scrubbing my bathroom floor. And what if I hadn't, taken that step to forgive my biological mom? Like, would I have been receptive to Melissa's email? Would I have even emailed her in the first place? Because it was such a lie, right? That had consumed me, that had me so convinced that I was unwanted. And that just like branched out into every area of my life, except with my children. Because my kids, right? They're so great. They loved me and they loved me well. And my husband loved me and loved me well. But I didn't love me. But for some reason, they saw something in me.
Mm.
And sometimes I just it sobers me up in a sense and like humbles me when I go back to that moment on the floor, just scrubbing. I had a choice to make. And I'm so like with forgiveness. And I think that's why I'm just so passionate about it. When we take that moment out of obedience, it can be one of the most difficult obstacles in our way of becoming fully in relationship with the Lord, right? I mean, He will come to us when we're dirty and scrubbing a bathroom floor, right? But He doesn't want us to stay in that place. And of course, we have many bathroom floors that we're going to scrub from here on out. And when I say dirty, I say that I was just living a lie. That was something that He never intended me to live. But He saved my life. And there's so many more other, little lives that it's hard for us survivors to focus on, because why me? Why us? But, He saw something in us, and there was a calling, there was a plan, there was a purpose. And I think for any survivor of anything, if we were to just turn our focus back on that pain, which is hard, but he never wants us to live in that place of trauma. He wants the best for us. And when we truly trust the Father, He opens doors. And years later, here you and I are calling ourselves pro-life speakers and ministering messages of hope and forgiveness and love. And, surviving an abortion, I mean, we should just be consumed with anger and hurt. And there were moments of that, but that wasn't failure, right? Mm-hmm. Those were moments that as humans, we need to process, but eventually give that pain over to the Lord. And, you just never know what He'll do with you. I had no idea. I mean, I never thought, oh, surviving this abortion is going to give me a great, job 20 years from now, or, whatever. I think like you haven't asked me to give a challenge yet to our audience, but I just have to tell all of you that no matter the pain, no matter the trauma you have in your past, if you will just trust the Lord and trust those that the Lord gives to you that want to walk with you through those deep, dirty places, those difficult places, you never know what He's going to do with your story. There's a hurting world out there, and even more now since COVID and all the movements, all the stuff that's going on across the US. Like there's a hurting world that we need to help. And it can be such as easy as sharing a story, telling people what you've gone through and what you did to get to that place. And one person hears it and like accepts the challenge to forgive, accepts the challenge to move forward and find counseling and find healing, or to trust a woman who says they have survived an abortion as well, and that they're there to help you. I mean, wow, what a God moment. I love this, Denisha. I'm so glad we could talk today.
Well, I think it's very relatable, like if you're listening and you haven't survived an abortion, right? That's a very unique niche to be in. But I think if we put our stories in, the picture that the Lord gave me a couple of years ago was like a big pot, like we're going to cook a pot. And if we put our stories specifically as survivors and other women put their stories in the pot, whether it be abuse, neglect, abandonment, whatever our stories are that created that trauma in our lives, we put that in, we turn up the heat and we boil off the exact situations, the exact circumstances of our stories. What we can agree with that's probably left in the bottom of that pot is unwanted, is shame, is guilt, is all of these emotions. And that is what we can come together as women and even men too. Like we can come together and lock arms and go, my story might be different than yours, but I can relate to that feeling that you had as a result of it. And those are the things that God wants to tend to. Those are the things that when you bring forgiveness in, that when you allow him to speak to you, those things are the things that we can remove out of the pot so that we can not have to carry that load around with us all the time. And time again, I've seen that. And that's one of the passions, with Reclaim Story. People have said, well, do you need to niche down a little bit more, not just women who have had pain in their past? And I'm like, no, it's women who have had something traumatic in their past. And I realize that's a huge portion. But when you put us all in the room together, whether it be addiction, whether it be whatever, you put all of us in the room together and we can relate to those heart feelings. And I think that's where the Lord wants to tend. He's not, I remember there's a quote that like, God isn't as concerned about our circumstances as he is the places in our heart. And not that he's not concerned with our circumstances, but he's more concerned about the impact it has on our heart. And so just tending to those together. And I love the tenderness that you had to show up each day and just be obedient and say, okay, God, I'm forgiving, her, for this. Like there's such a beautiful lesson in that. And you mentioned that you were practicing forgiveness.
Yeah.
That really struck me because I think sometimes we think it's one and done, or if I do that, it's going to bring more and more up in me. But what you found is the more you practiced forgiveness, the more forgiveness you stepped into and the more healing that God gave you.
It was like what the Lord gave me was my confession is my possession. And that's something my one of my pastors at my church had preached on years ago. And so it was just one message that was great. And I left it at that moment. But I realized, because there was one day I didn't want to say it. And I was just having one of those days. And the words, my confession is my possession. What I confess and say is what I'm going to possess and what's going to be reality. And I know as Christians, when you take the subject of psychology, and science, we definitely science is real. But there's definitely aspects of it, we don't agree with. But the more positivity that comes out of our mouth, I do believe that affects us. And it certainly affects other people, right? If we're always speaking negative, then people aren't going to want to be around you. But if we're speaking positive things about ourselves and about others, people are going to want to be around you. And looking back at the process, because when you're doing something out of obedience, you don't see the bigger picture. Right. But I'm thankful that now that I'm well past it, I can see that bigger picture from the Lord's perspective. And that, by just doing it out of obedience was showing my heart for him and wanting to do the right thing. But because God is such a good God, he didn't stop it right there. He gave me full and complete healing in it. And then on top of it, introduced me to a network that understood. Like I finally had someone that understood where I had been. And then on top of it, my calling and purpose came into play as well. So it wasn't just, I'm going to do this out of obedience and I was obedient and okay, great. He just kept building on top of it. And isn't that how God works in our lives? I mean, we people, we can't imagine the things that he has for us and how he's going to bring them to play. And I wanted to address one thing you had said, or it got me thinking about this, is I know with people who have gone through multiple traumas, and I am one of those people. And when we go through something like my family recently went through a pretty big trauma about 4 years ago, and then it stayed with us for a 4-year process. And there were those moments where I would say, how could you, Lord? because we know how powerful God is and that he could prevent situations from happening. Especially as a mother, I prayed for my children's safety every day, right? And one of my kids had something, happen against them. And my initial reaction was like, how could you? Like, I prayed to you, I talked to you, I was obedient in forgiving my birth mom, all these little things. Like, how could you allow that to happen? Because you didn't have to. And I realized in that thinking, like, obviously I had some anger towards the Lord, but God's a big God. And that's okay, right? He can handle that. We're angry at him. And I think when we're honest and we show that anger to him and not try to hide it out of shame, that's an actual better place to be in, because he sees that you're recognizing he's angry at you and he can work in that, right? And over time, I realized, wow, what a distraction it is to be constantly, for me, like going to the Lord saying, how could you do this? How could you do this? Because obviously it's not God's intention to cause bad things to hurt people, right? We happen to live in a world where sin has run rampant and bad things unfortunately happen. But the goodness of God tells us that he can take that situation, that bad, painful one, and turn it around for his good. And sometimes in our humanness, we think, oh, well, it will look this way. And more often than not, it won't, because God is the God of all things, right? He sees the bigger picture. He saw us when we were in the womb, just like that tiny little speck, and he knew the greatness that would be within us. He knew the moments that we would forgive and trust him and move forward in our walks with him. And for people that have gone through those traumas, I get it. When we blame God, why didn't you stop this from happening? And I'm speaking from a person who has gone through multiple things. And today I'm only speaking of, surviving an abortion, which in itself is, wild and crazy enough. But when we take that focus off of God allowed this to happen and God hurt me, we open ourselves to a point to where it's like, okay, this happened. I can't stop it from happening. Unfortunately, our lives are going to completely change and we're going to go down a new path. But I will trust the Lord. I will trust him with my family. I will trust him, with my heart. And I will trust him where he's leading me, no matter what, right? And we can never go wrong trusting in him. But if there is anyone out there who's angry at the Lord for what has happened to them, I would tell you that in your prayer time, or even when you're on the floor in your bathroom scrubbing the floor, just yell it out to him. I'm angry at you. Why would you allow this to happen? And see what happens from that. When we are honest in how we feel, see what God can do in that.
His shoulders are big enough to carry that. And he can handle that. Thank you for what you've shared today, Jen. I appreciate your honesty. I appreciate your heart. And the example that kind of you challenge all of us to in different areas, whether it be forgiveness, whether it be, fighting back with the truth against the lies that we believe. So thank you so much. And Jen, if someone was listening and they thought, wow, I can really connect with her, and they want to follow you or connect with you outside of this podcast, how can they do that?
Yes. So I have a Facebook page, Jennifer Milbourn, Vacuum Aspiration Abortion Survivor. And I am also on the Abortion Survivors Network webpage. And if there's a search bar, you just type in Jennifer Milbourn or go to the speakers tab, you'll see my picture and my story on there. So if you'd like to get a hold of me, I'd love to talk to you.
She's pretty easy to talk to also. So Jen, thank you so much. Thanks for being with us today.
Thank you for having me. This was my pleasure. Thank you. What an honor.
Thanks for listening. I pray you found hope in today's conversation and maybe even feel a little less alone in your story. Stay connected with us on Facebook and Instagram at Reclaimed Story. Want to learn more about living a reclaimed life and how you can be a part of our growing community of reclaimers? Check out our website at reclaimedstory.com. All of those links and more will be in the show notes. And if you enjoyed this inspirational podcast, be sure to subscribe, rate, and review. That is a huge help in helping us reach more people to live the reclaimed life. Thank you so much for listening.